Hello everybody, my name is KiMar Gartman, and this is Cuppa with KiMar, Life in Short Sips. I'm very excited for today's episode because we're going to be talking about mystical experiences. I have done a little bit of homework, so I've got my computer here and I'm going to read a few things that I found interesting to you throughout this episode. Plus, I have my Alice in Wonderland mug. Perfect for talking about mystical experiences, especially when you think about the Cheshire Cat. Okay, let's get started. The first thing I like to do when I tackle a new subject is I like to come up with a definition. And so I got online and found Merriam-Webster Dictionary and their definition for the word mystical. And they said it means having a spiritual meaning or reality that is neither apparent to the senses nor obvious to the intelligence. So as I did my research, I did come across a few articles that I found very interesting. The first one is from the Oblate School of Theology, and they put out an article called Mystical Experience and Everyday People. And it's written by Father Ron Rolheister, a Catholic priest. And he says that when it comes to mysticism, often that concept is grossly misunderstood. He says we tend to identify mysticism with what's extraordinary and paranormal and see it as something for the spiritual elite. But it can be as simple as a searing clarity of mind and heart. And the article goes on to highlight a woman by the name of Ruth Burrows, who was a Carmelite nun in the UK. She lived to be 100 years old, just died in November of 2023. But she wrote quite extensively on the idea of mystical experiences, and she defines them as being touched by God in a way that's beyond words, imagination, and feeling. The article says God, as we know, is oneness, truth, goodness, and beauty. So anytime we are genuinely touched by oneness, truth, goodness, or beauty, without anything distorting that, we're having a mystical experience. I found that to be a very beautiful description of what a mystical experience is like. And then I went on to find a new website that I've never been to before called Loner Wolf. And at Loner Wolf, they put out an article titled 9 Signs That You've Had a Mystical Experience. And as I read those 9 signs, they really reminded me of people who've had near-death experiences. So in the next video, we'll talk about near-death experiences. But in this one, this article from Loner Wolf included a very interesting allegory from the Hindu tradition of Advaita Vedanta. Not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly. But what it says is that mystical experiences are kind of like this. You're in a dark room. You know that there's a snake in that dark room with you. You can sense it. You can see it every now and then. But then all of a sudden the lights come on and you have this new vision of the room, and there's no snake in the room. There's just a pile of rope. And so when the light goes out again, you're not afraid anymore because you've had this moment of clarity and insight. And the Loner Wolf article says, it is like a flash of truth that releases you from your limited sense of self and gives you a taste of reality that somehow feels more real. So one final article that I came across was from the Synthesis Institute. And the Synthesis Institute is an organization that trains psychedelic practitioners. So needless to say, the article was quite interesting. And they describe mystical experiences as short-lasting, feels immensely meaningful or profound, and shatters some of your preconceptions. So the Synthesis Institute in this article went on to describe how mysticism has been a part of many of the traditional religious practices throughout the years. In fact, in Christianity, mysticism was very welcome until the Protestant Reformation, when the church hierarchy was established and mystical experiences became marginalized in Christian circles. The article goes on to talk about modern Judaism, welcomes mysticism through the Kabbalah, Hinduism through modern religious tradition called Neo-Vedanta. Islam even has a branch called the Sufi branch that suggests that a closeness to God can be achieved in life through mystical experiences. And finally, Buddhism is probably the religion that is most open to the mystical. If you recall from the last video, I had a visitation from my husband who died back in April of 22. And I consider it a true mystical experience because he came and for just a minute, the lights turned on a memory that I had that was causing me a lot of pain. But there are some people who might say that my visitation was just made up in my own mind. Some other people that I've listened to before would say that dead people never communicate with living people, that instead it's just the demonic realm that steps in and masquerades as people that we love and tells us things that are not true. And then there's also some people who might say, I was breathing too much hairspray on that day and I had something wonky going on. Well, any of these possibilities might be true. There are people who have many mystical experiences when they're under psychedelic drugs. And then it's true, I do believe that we have an earth that we can touch, but then there's also a spiritual realm out there that has angels and demons and good and bad. And we have to be careful what kind of spirits that we're tapping into in those experiences. And then I do believe also that maybe sometimes we do grieve so much that we hear other voices and we hear other people, our loved ones, come to us. So all of this leads me to ask the question, when do we know that what we're experiencing is actually real? So I think that it all depends on how your mystical experience rests in your spirit when you're having them or afterwards. So for instance, if the mystical experience has left me feeling afraid, or maybe the mystical experience has me angry at someone and I just want to go out and get revenge, or maybe the mystical experience has me paranoid, I would say any of that kind of a response is not the kind of mystical experience that we would want to have. And we can say, no, that wasn't even real. I don't know where that was coming from. But I do think that mystical experiences that align with what we were talking about earlier, that leads to oneness, a better understanding of truth, goodness, and beauty, I think those are mystical experiences that could possibly be real and be mystical experiences that we can grow from and heal from, and that they're healthy for us to have. After everything we've talked about today, I would be curious what kind of thoughts you have, what kind of mystical experiences you've been having. If you want to leave your comments in the comment section below, I'll look forward to reading them. And then when you're ready, let's move on to episode number 7, where we're going to talk about near-death experiences, a very fascinating topic indeed. This is Cuppa with KiMar, Life in Short Sips.